They called it the Terran Pacification Campaign. 300 warships of the Kethran Empire's finest fleet, enough firepower to glass a dozen worlds, all converging on one small blue planet at the edge of a spiral arm that no civilized species had bothered to explore properly. The humans had been silent for too long. 6 months without a single transmission, no response to ultimatums, no begging for mercy. The Empire's intelligence suggested Earth had perhaps 50 primitive vessels defending their homeworld, metal cans with chemical rockets that wouldn't last 10 seconds against plasma cannons. Admiral Vextar adjusted his ceremonial armor as he watched the blue marble grow larger on the main screen. This would be over in minutes. The humans would surrender when they saw the true might of a galactic superpower, or they would burn. Either way, the Kethran Empire would claim their fourth species this cycle. But, as the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, something was wrong. The human ships weren't there. No desperate defensive formation, no last-ditch charge toward their doom. Just empty space. "Admiral," his sensor officer called out, voice trembling. "I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies near the gas giant." "Something's there, but it's bigger than our entire fleet combined." Vextar leaned forward in his command throne. "Show me." The main screen flickered, zooming in on Jupiter's swirling storms. For a moment, nothing seemed out of place. Then, the storms parted like curtains, and something impossible emerged from within the gas giant itself. Something that redefined everything the Kethran Empire thought they knew about human technology, human ambition, and human fury. The war that was supposed to last minutes was about to be decided in seconds. And the Empire had made the fatal mistake of thinking humanity would fight fair. The Kethran Empire's third fleet materialized at the edge of Earth's solar system with the precision that had conquered 17 star systems before this one. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Dominion's Fist, watching the tactical display populate with enemy contacts. His mandibles clicked in what his species considered satisfaction as the numbers rolled in, exactly what their intelligence had predicted. 57 human vessels scattered throughout the inner system, most clustered around their homeworld like frightened younglings hiding behind their mother's carapace. "Sensor sweep complete, Admiral," reported Lieutenant Kessare from the tactical station. "Human fleet composition matches our projections. Primitive chemical propulsion, basic kinetic weapons, no energy shields detected. Their largest vessel measures barely 300 meters. Vextar's four eyes swept across the holographic display, each contact glowing red against the black of space. 312 ships under his command faced 57 human defenders. The odds were so overwhelmingly in the Empire's favor that this couldn't even be called a battle, it would be an execution. "Open a channel to the human fleet," Vextar commanded, settling his massive frame deeper into the command throne. "Let's give them one chance to surrender before we demonstrate why resistance to the Empire is futile." The communications officer worked at his console, sending the standard Imperial frequency across the void. Static filled the bridge speakers for several moments before a human voice crackled through, speaking their crude language with what the translation matrix identified as defiance. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. You are in violation of Earth's territorial space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Vextar's mandibles clacked in amusement. The human's voice carried none of the fear he expected from a species facing impossible odds. Either they were remarkably brave or remarkably stupid. In his experience, when it came to primitive species, it was usually the latter. "Human Admiral," Vextar replied, allowing his voice to carry the full weight of Imperial authority, "I am Admiral Vextar of the Kethran Empire. You will surrender your fleet and your world unconditionally, or I will demonstrate why your species was foolish to remain silent when offered the gift of Imperial citizenship. You have 10 of your minutes to comply." The channel closed with a burst of static. Around the bridge, Vextar's officers exchanged glances that mixed anticipation with boredom. They had performed this same routine 17 times before. Sometimes the primitives surrendered immediately. Sometimes they chose to die gloriously. Either way, the outcome was always the same. Captain Mordex, Vextar's second-in-command, approached the Admiral's throne with measured steps. "Shall I begin positioning the fleet for bombardment formations, Admiral?" "The humans' weapons cannot penetrate our shields at any range, but standard doctrine suggests maintaining distance to minimize any lucky hits on our fighter squadrons. Proceed, Captain, Vextar agreed. Though I suspect this will be over before our fighters even launch. Deploy screening formations around the capital ships and begin charging the plasma batteries. If the humans haven't surrendered by the time we reach optimal firing range, we'll give them a demonstration they'll remember for the brief remainder of their existence. The Third Fleet began its stately advance toward the inner system. 312 ships moving in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the polished perfection that marked vessels of the Empire's finest fighting force. Each ship had been tested in battle against species far more advanced than humanity. Each crew had earned their position through victories against enemies who actually posed a threat. As they advanced, the human fleet began to move as well. But, instead of forming defensive positions around their homeworld as doctrine would suggest, the human ships were scattering. Some moved toward the asteroid belt, others toward the outer gas giants. A few seemed to be heading directly away from the system entirely. Curious, Captain Mordex observed, studying the tactical display. Their fleet is breaking formation. Are they abandoning their homeworld? Lieutenant Kesare looked up from her sensors with confusion clear in her posture. Admiral, I'm reading massive power signatures from several of the human ships, but the energy patterns don't match anything in our databases. They appear to be charging weapon systems, but the readings are inconsistent with their technological level. Vextar leaned forward, his interest piqued despite himself. Throughout his career, he had learned to pay attention when something didn't match expectations. The species that survived first contact with the Empire were usually the ones that had surprises hidden in their technological arsenals. "Show me the power readings," he commanded. The main display shifted to show energy signatures flowing from the human vessels. What Vextar saw made his blood run cold. The power outputs were massive, far beyond what should have been possible for ships using chemical propulsion. More disturbing still, several of the human vessels showed energy patterns that matched Imperial fusion technology. How is this possible? Captain Mordex breathed, his own mandibles clicking nervously. Our intelligence indicated the humans barely achieved interstellar flight 50 solar cycles ago. They shouldn't have fusion technology, much less power plants capable of these outputs. Before Vextar could respond, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. Ships were emerging from behind Earth's moon, dozens of them, their configurations unlike anything the Kethran databases contained. These vessels were larger than the initial human fleet, their hulls showing the smooth curves that indicated advanced manufacturing techniques. "Admiral," Lieutenant Kesare called out, her voice tight with sudden concern, "I'm detecting additional vessels throughout the system. They were hidden, using some form of stealth technology we didn't recognize. The actual human fleet size is significantly larger than our estimates." The tactical display updated as previously invisible ships revealed themselves. The human fleet that had appeared scattered and weak now showed its true strength, over 200 vessels of varying sizes, with the largest approaching the dimensions of Imperial cruisers. But that wasn't what made Vextar's blood freeze in his veins. The largest energy signature on the display wasn't coming from any ship. It was coming from Jupiter itself. "Magnify grid 77 Alpha," Vextar ordered, his voice steady despite the growing unease in his chest. The main screen focused on the gas giant, its roiling atmosphere displayed in perfect detail. For several moments, nothing seemed unusual. Then, the storm patterns began to shift, and Vextar realized he was looking at something that would haunt his dreams for whatever remained of his life. The storms weren't natural phenomena. They were camouflage. As the artificial weather patterns dissipated, they revealed a structure hidden within Jupiter's upper atmosphere. At first glance, it appeared to be a space station, massive beyond anything the Empire had ever constructed, its bulk easily dwarfing the largest Imperial shipyards. But, as more of the structure became visible, Vextar realized he wasn't looking at a station at all. He was looking at a ship. A ship larger than some of the Empire's colony worlds. "Impossible," Captain Mordex whispered. "Nothing that large could be mobile. The power requirements alone would exceed the output of a star." The structure, the ship, began to move. Slowly at first, then, with increasing speed as it cleared Jupiter's gravity well. Its hull was a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, giving the massive vessel an ominous presence that made even the Empire's mighty dreadnoughts appear insignificant by comparison. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, his voice cracking with stress, "incoming transmission from the human fleet." It's coming from that ship." "Put it through," Vextar commanded, his mind racing to process what he was seeing. A new voice filled the bridge, not Admiral Chen this time, but someone else. A male human whose tone carried absolute confidence and something that chilled Vextar to his core, anticipation. "Admiral Vextar of the Kethran Empire," the voice said, "this is Admiral Marcus Webb aboard the UES Nemesis. Thank you for providing us with a live-fire exercise. It's been 6 months since we had proper targets to test our new weapons systems against." The transmission cut to visual, showing a human male in a military uniform that bore no resemblance to anything in Imperial databases. Behind him, Vextar could see a bridge that stretched beyond the camera's view, filled with control stations and crew members working with the efficiency of a military force that had been preparing for this moment. "I should mention," Admiral Webb continued, "that the fleet you're facing isn't Earth's complete defensive force. It's our training squadron. The ships you initially detected were Academy graduates on their final examination cruise. We've been watching your approach for weeks, Admiral, and, I have to say, your intelligence-gathering capabilities are remarkably poor." Vextar found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. What is that ship?" Admiral Webb smiled, and Vextar realized he was seeing an expression that held no warmth, no mercy, and absolutely no fear. "This is humanity's first supercarrier, Admiral. We built her inside Jupiter because we needed the gravity well to test her maneuvering systems. She carries a complement of 15,000 fighters, each one equipped with weapons technology that your Empire gave us when you destroyed our first colony ship." The implications hit Vextar like a physical blow. The humans hadn't been silent for 6 months because they were preparing to surrender. They had been silent because they were preparing for war. "You see, Admiral," Webb continued, his smile growing colder, "when your Empire murdered 2 million colonists at Proxima Centauri, you made a critical error. You assumed we would respond like every other species you've encountered, with fear, desperation, and hopeless resistance. But humans have a different approach to overwhelming odds." On the tactical display, the massive human ship completed its emergence from Jupiter's atmosphere. Vextar could see weapons ports opening along its hull, thousands of them, each one the size of an Imperial cruiser's main battery. "We innovate," Admiral Webb said simply. "And, Admiral Vextar? Your 10 minutes are up." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Vextar stared at the tactical display, his mind struggling to process the magnitude of his miscalculation. The Kethran Empire's Third Fleet, pride of the Imperial Navy, was facing an enemy that had used 6 months of apparent silence to prepare the most devastating surprise in the history of galactic warfare. "Admiral," Lieutenant Kesare whispered, "what are your orders?" Vextar looked at the massive human supercarrier, at the fleet of advanced ships that had appeared from nowhere, at the tactical display that showed his forces surrounded and outgunned by an enemy that shouldn't have existed. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Vextar of the Kethran Empire had no idea what his orders should be. The silence on the Bridge of Dominion's fist stretched for exactly 37 seconds before Admiral Vextar's training reasserted itself. 3 decades of military service in the Empire's expansion campaigns had taught him that hesitation in battle was death, regardless of how impossible the situation appeared. "All ships, combat formation Delta 7, he commanded, his voice carrying across the fleet's tactical network. "Prepare for immediate engagement. Target priority is the large vessel. Concentrate all fire on that supercarrier." Captain Mordex moved to his station with practiced efficiency, but Vextar could see uncertainty in every line of his posture. "Admiral, perhaps we should consider withdrawal. Our intelligence was clearly compromised. A strategic retreat would allow us to belay that," Vextar snapped. "The Empire does not retreat from primitives, regardless of whatever tricks they may have learned. They have one large ship against our entire fleet. Numbers will tell." Even as he spoke the words, Vextar felt doubt gnawing at his confidence. The human supercarrier, the Nemesis, defied everything he understood about shipbuilding and naval architecture. Its sheer size suggested construction capabilities that matched or exceeded the Empire's most advanced shipyards, and its energy signatures indicated power systems that shouldn't have been possible with any known technology. On the tactical display, the Kethrin fleet spread into attack formation with the precision that had made the Empire's navy the terror of 17 star systems. Heavy cruisers formed the center of the formation, their massive plasma batteries charging for the opening salvo. Destroyers and frigates spread out in screening positions, ready to intercept any fighters or missiles the humans might launch. The formation was textbook perfect, a demonstration of imperial military doctrine refined through centuries of successful conquest. "Plasma batteries charged and ready," reported the weapons officer. "All ships report green status for primary weapons." Vextar studied the tactical display one more time. The human fleet had not responded to the Empire's formation change. Instead, they maintained their scattered positions throughout the system, showing what appeared to be tactical indiscipline. Only the massive Supercarrier had moved, positioning itself between the Kethrin fleet and Earth. Its fighter bays remained closed, its weapons systems showing minimal energy signatures. "Perhaps they're not as advanced as they appeared," Captain Mordex suggested. "That ship may be nothing more than an elaborate bluff, impressive to look at, but lacking in actual firepower." Before Vextar could respond, Lieutenant Kesare looked up from her sensor station with an expression of complete bewilderment. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the human fleet, but the patterns are unlike anything we've encountered. The power signatures suggest they're charging weapons, but the energy types don't match any known technology." "Elaborate," Vextar ordered. "Sir, some of the readings suggest plasma weaponry similar to our own, but with power outputs that exceed our heavy cruisers. Others show energy patterns that resemble antimatter containment systems, which should be impossible for a species at their technological level. And several ships are generating what appears to be gravitational distortion fields." Vextar felt another chill run through his carapace. Gravitational manipulation technology was theoretical even for the Empire's most advanced scientists. If the humans had somehow developed practical gravitic weapons. "Admiral Webb is transmitting again," the communications officer announced. "Put him through," Vextar replied, hoping his voice didn't betray his growing unease. Admiral Webb's image appeared on the main screen, his human features composed in an expression of calm professionalism. Behind him, the bridge of the Nemesis bustled with activity as crew members prepared for battle. "Admiral Vextar," Webb said, "I'm required by human military law to offer you one final opportunity to withdraw. Your fleet is magnificent, truly impressive by any standard. It would be a shame to destroy such fine ships and experienced crews unnecessarily." Vextar's mandibles clicked in what his species considered defiant laughter. "You speak as though the outcome of this engagement is already decided, human. You have one ship against our entire fleet. Surrender now, and I may allow your crews to live as slaves rather than dying in the void." Admiral Webb nodded slowly, as though he had expected exactly that response. "I see. In that case, I should probably explain something about human military doctrine that your intelligence services seem to have missed." The transmission shifted to show a tactical display of the solar system. Vextar recognized his own fleet's formation, but now he could see additional details that his sensors had somehow missed. Every asteroid in the belt showed artificial modifications. The human ships scattered throughout the system weren't running randomly, they were positioned at specific coordinates that formed a complex three-dimensional pattern. "You see, Admiral," Webb continued, "humanity learned something valuable from your Empire's previous attacks on our colonies. We learned that superior firepower alone isn't enough to guarantee victory. What matters is how effectively you can apply that firepower." As Webb spoke, new icons began appearing on the tactical display. Weapon emplacements throughout the asteroid belt came online, their targeting systems locking onto the Kethrin fleet. Similar installations activated on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, creating overlapping fields of fire that covered every possible escape route. "We also learned," Webb said, his voice taking on a harder edge, "that the Empire's tactical doctrine relies heavily on initial shock value. Your fleets depend on psychological warfare as much as actual firepower, the assumption that primitive species will panic when faced with overwhelming force." Vextar stared at the display in growing horror. The human defensive network was massive, far beyond anything a single world should have been capable of constructing. The weapons platforms showed energy signatures that matched or exceeded the firepower of Imperial capital ships. Unfortunately for you, Admiral, Webb continued, humans have a saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. You fooled us at Proxima Centauri. You're not going to fool us again. The transmission ended, and, immediately the bridge erupted in alarm signals as the Nemesis began launching fighters. But, these weren't the small, primitive craft Vextar had expected. The first wave consisted of sleek vessels that matched Imperial interceptors in size and apparent capability. Wave after wave poured from the Supercarrier's launch bays, hundreds of fighters, then, thousands. Impossible, Captain Mordex breathed. No single ship could carry that many fighters. The hangar space alone would require, he never finished the sentence. The first human fighter squadron reached weapons range and opened fire, and Vextar realized that humanity's technological advancement hadn't stopped with shipbuilding. The fighters carried weapons that defied Imperial understanding. Beams of coherent energy that punched through deflector shields as though they didn't exist. Missiles that maneuvered with impossible agility, tracking their targets through evasive maneuvers that should have broken their guidance systems. Most terrifying of all, some of the fighters seemed to be armed with miniaturized versions of the gravitational weapons Cassare had detected, weapons that reached out across space and crushed Imperial ships like tin cans. Return fire. Vextar commanded. All batteries, engage the fighters. The Kethrin fleet responded with disciplined precision, plasma batteries and laser arrays filling space with deadly energy. But, for every human fighter they destroyed, 10 more took its place. The Nemesis continued disgorging wave after wave of combat craft, each one equipped with weapons that matched or exceeded anything in the Imperial arsenal. Admiral, the weapons officer called out, the fighters are equipped with some form of adaptive shielding. Our targeting computers can't maintain locks, and their defensive systems are adjusting to our weapon frequencies in real time. Vextar watched in mounting despair as his fleet's opening salvos proved ineffective against the human fighters. Worse still, the fighters weren't simply engaging in a defensive action, they were systematically targeting the Empire's ships with surgical precision, focusing their attacks on weapon systems and propulsion units rather than going for quick kills. They're disabling us, Captain Mordex observed with professional detachment. Not destroying, disabling. They want to capture our ships intact. The realization sent a chill through Vextar's carapace. Captured Imperial technology would provide the humans with insights into the Empire's military capabilities. If they could reverse engineer Imperial weapons and defensive systems. Sir, Lieutenant Cassare announced, her voice tight with stress, the weapon platforms in the asteroid belt are powering up. Energy readings suggest they're armed with some form of mass driver system, kinetic weapons capable of accelerating projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. Before Vextar could respond, the platforms opened fire. Streams of hypervelocity projectiles, each one no larger than a pebble but moving at nearly 10% the speed of light, swept through space toward the Imperial fleet. The projectiles were too small and too fast for the ship's defensive systems to track, and they struck with devastating effect. The frigate Talon's Edge took 3 hits amidships and simply disintegrated, its hull vaporized by the kinetic energy release. The cruiser Eternal might lost its entire forward section when a single projectile punched through its plasma batteries and detonated the energy storage cells. Throughout the fleet, ships staggered under impacts that no armor could withstand and no shield could deflect. Evasive maneuvers. Vextar ordered, but, even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were futile. The human weapon platforms had positioned themselves to create overlapping fields of fire that covered every possible escape vector. The Kethrin fleet was trapped in a killing field that stretched across half the solar system. Admiral, Captain Mordex said quietly, perhaps we should reconsider our options. A tactical withdrawal might still be possible if we know, Vextar replied, though his voice lacked the conviction it had held minutes before. The Empire does not withdraw. Signal all ships, concentrate fire on the Supercarrier. If we can destroy their command ship, the rest of their fleet may lose coordination. It was a desperate gambit, but it was the only option that didn't involve admitting defeat to a primitive species. The Kethrin fleet turned its remaining weapons toward the Nemesis, plasma batteries and antimatter torpedoes converging on the massive human vessel. For a moment, Vextar felt hope. The supercarrier was large, but size also meant it couldn't maneuver quickly. Surely concentrated fire from the Empire's finest ships would be enough to the hope died as the human ship's defensive systems activated. Energy barriers that seemed to bend space itself formed around the Nemesis, deflecting plasma beams and absorbing antimatter explosions without apparent effort. When the Imperial barrage ended, the supercarrier hung in space completely undamaged, its hull showing not even scorch marks from the attack. "Impossible," Vexstar whispered. "No defensive system could withstand that level of concentrated firepower." Admiral Webb's voice crackled across the communications channel, his tone now carrying a note of genuine regret. "Admiral Vexstar, your fleet has fought with honor. I'm prepared to accept the surrender of your remaining ships and guarantee the safety of your crews. You've seen what humanity is capable of now. Further resistance will only result in unnecessary casualties." Vexstar stared at the tactical display, watching as his proud fleet was systematically dismantled by an enemy that had been invisible just an hour before. Ships that had conquered star systems and brought glory to the Empire were being disabled and captured by fighters launched from a vessel that shouldn't have been possible to construct. The Kethran Empire's Third Fleet, the spearhead of Imperial expansion, was being defeated by the species they had come to conquer. Admiral Vexstar watched his tactical display with the detached fascination of a professional soldier observing his own destruction. In 30 minutes of engagement, the Kethran Empire's Third Fleet had lost 47 ships, not to destruction, but to surgical precision that left each vessel disabled and drifting. The humans weren't simply winning, they were demonstrating a level of tactical sophistication that made the Empire's vaunted military doctrine appear primitive by comparison. "Admiral," Captain Mordex reported, his voice carefully controlled, "the Righteous Fury and Starpiercer are reporting complete propulsion failure. The Dominion's Pride has lost all weapon systems. The humans they're boarding the disabled ships." Through the bridge's viewports, Vexstar could see the evidence of humanity's methodology. Small craft, too small to be proper assault shuttles, were docking with crippled Imperial vessels. Each boarding action was precise, coordinated, and apparently bloodless. The humans weren't butchering his crews, they were capturing them intact, along with their ships and all the technological secrets those vessels contained. "Sir," Lieutenant Kesare called out, her voice tight with professional concern, "I'm detecting massive energy buildups from the human supercarrier. The readings suggest they're charging some form of primary weapon system." Vexstar turned his attention to the Nemesis. The massive human vessel had remained relatively passive throughout the engagement, content to launch fighters and coordinate the systematic destruction of the Imperial fleet. Now, however, ports were opening along its hull, not the relatively small fighter launch bays, but enormous apertures that could have accommodated Imperial cruisers. "Magnify Section 7 of the enemy supercarrier," Vexstar ordered. The main screen focused on the human ship's forward section, revealing weapon systems that defied every principle of naval architecture the Empire had ever developed. The ports weren't designed for conventional energy weapons or missile systems. Instead, they housed what appeared to be massive projector arrays, each one large enough to house an entire Imperial weapons deck. Admiral Webb's voice filled the bridge once again, transmitted on an open channel that reached every remaining ship in the Kethran fleet. "Admiral Vexstar, I'm going to demonstrate why continued resistance is inadvisable. Please observe the asteroid designated 2157 Gamma in your navigational database." Lieutenant Kesare quickly located the specified asteroid on her sensors. "Admiral, it's a Class M asteroid approximately 15 kilometers in diameter, located at the edge of the belt. Iron-nickel composition, similar to thousands of others in this system." "I see it," Vexstar replied, though he had no idea why the humans wanted his attention focused on a random piece of space rock. "That asteroid," Admiral Webb continued, "represents the approximate mass and composition of an Imperial dreadnought. What you're about to witness is the difference between conventional weapons technology and what humanity has developed during our 6 months of preparation." The Nemesis rotated slowly, bringing its forward weapon arrays to bear on the distant asteroid. Energy readings spiked across every sensor system as the massive projectors charged to full power. Then, with no visible beam or projectile, the asteroid simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, Vexstar had seen plenty of destroyed asteroids during his career. Obliterated by antimatter warheads, shattered by plasma bombardment, reduced to expanding clouds of debris. This was something entirely different. The asteroid didn't explode or break apart. One moment it existed as a solid 15-kilometer mass of rock and metal, and the next moment there was nothing but empty space. Gravitational collapse weapon, Captain Mordex whispered, his mandibles clicking in involuntary terror. They've weaponized a black hole generator. Lieutenant Kesaray's sensor readings confirmed the impossible. The asteroid was subjected to localized gravitational acceleration exceeding 15,000 standard gravities. The entire mass was compressed beyond the event horizon threshold in approximately 0.3 seconds. Vexstar stared at the empty space where the asteroid had been, his mind struggling to process the implications. Gravitational weapons were theoretical constructs, mathematical equations that described forces so vast and energies so enormous that actually building such devices should have been impossible for any species below Type 2 civilization status. The humans, he said slowly, are using weapons that require stellar-level energy outputs. How is this possible? Admiral Webb answered the question as though he had heard Vexstar's words. You're wondering about power requirements, Admiral. The gravitational collapse system does indeed require massive energy inputs. Fortunately, we've had 6 months to prepare, and humanity has never been limited by conventional thinking when it comes to energy generation. The tactical display updated to show new information about the human ships scattered throughout the system. What Vexstar had initially dismissed as random positioning now revealed itself as something far more sophisticated. Each human vessel was positioned at a specific point in space where the gravitational fields of the system's planets created natural energy collection zones. We're using the solar system itself as our power grid, Webb explained. Gravitational differential generators placed at strategic Lagrange points, solar collection arrays that dwarf anything your empire has constructed, and fusion reactors built into the cores of asteroids. Every planet, every moon, every significant mass in this system has been converted into part of our defensive network. The scope of humanity's preparation was staggering. In 6 months, they had transformed an entire star system into a fortress that made the Empire's most heavily defended worlds appear vulnerable by comparison. The Kethrin fleet hadn't just stumbled into a military engagement, they had walked into a trap that had been 6 months in the making. Admiral, the communications officer announced, the human fleet is transmitting tactical data directly to our navigation computers. They're showing us our own weaknesses. On the main screen, a detailed analysis appeared showing every flaw in the Imperial formation. Gaps in defensive coverage, overlapping fields of fire that created dead zones, coordination delays between ship types that left brief windows of vulnerability. The humans had analyzed the Kethrin fleet's tactics with surgical precision and were now demonstrating exactly how thoroughly those tactics had been countered. This is impossible, Captain Mordex stated. Our formation protocols are classified at the highest levels. No alien species should have access to Imperial tactical doctrine. Admiral Webb's image reappeared on the screen, his expression carrying what Vexstar now recognized as carefully controlled anger. I'm afraid your empire made a critical error when you destroyed our colony ship at Proxima Centauri, Admiral. That ship was carrying more than just colonists. It was carrying some of humanity's brightest minds, xenobiologists, engineers, tactical analysts, and, most importantly, intelligence specialists. The implications hit Vexstar like a physical blow. The Proxima Centauri colony ship had been destroyed as an object lesson, a demonstration of what happened to species that attempted to expand beyond their homeworlds without Imperial permission. But, if the ship had carried intelligence specialists. Before your ships destroyed the New Horizon, Webb continued, our people managed to transmit detailed sensor readings of your vessels back to Earth. Hull configurations, weapon signatures, shield frequencies, tactical formations, everything our analysts needed to develop countermeasures. You gave us 6 months to prepare, Admiral, and you gave us complete information about your capabilities. You studied us, Vexstar said, the realization bringing a bitter taste to his mouth. You used our own attack against the colonists to learn our weaknesses. We learned, we adapted, and we prepared, Webb confirmed. Humanity has a particular talent for taking our enemy's strengths and turning them against them. Your empire's tactical doctrine is indeed impressive, Admiral. It's also predictable. As if to emphasize the point, the human fighters began executing maneuvers that perfectly anticipated every defensive action the Imperial fleet attempted. When Kethran ships tried to form protective screens around damaged vessels, the human fighters were already in position to exploit the gaps. When Imperial commanders attempted to concentrate their remaining firepower, the humans had already redeployed to avoid the convergence zones. "Sir," Lieutenant Kesare reported, "the enemy fighters are using our own tactical protocols against us. Every standard maneuver we attempt, they've already positioned to counter. It's as though they know what we're going to do before we do it." Vextar watched his fleet being dismantled with methodical precision. The humans weren't simply outfighting the Empire's forces, they were demonstrating complete mastery of Imperial tactics while employing weapons and strategies that the Empire had never encountered. "Admiral," Captain Mordex said quietly, "we have 17 ships remaining in fighting condition. The humans have captured or disabled the rest of our fleet without destroying a single vessel. At this rate of engagement. At this rate, they'll have our entire fleet captured within the hour," Vextar finished. "And they'll do it without losing a single ship of their own." It was a level of tactical superiority that Vextar had never witnessed in 3 decades of military service. The humans weren't just winning, they were providing a masterclass in naval warfare using the Kethran fleet as a training exercise. Admiral Webb's voice returned to the channel, but this time his tone carried a note of respect that surprised Vextar. "Admiral, your ships and crews have fought with honor against impossible odds. I have no desire to see brave soldiers die unnecessarily. I'm prepared to accept the surrender of your fleet and guarantee the safety of every crew member under the terms of the Geneva Conventions." "What are the Geneva Conventions?" Vextar asked, his pride warring with his responsibility to the soldiers under his command. "Human military law regarding the treatment of prisoners of war," Webb explained. "Your crews will be held in comfortable facilities, provided with appropriate food and medical care, and treated with the dignity befitting professional soldiers. When this war ends, they will be repatriated to your empire unharmed." Vextar looked around his bridge at officers who had served the Empire with distinction for decades. Captain Mordex, who had won glory at the siege of Kelroth. Lieutenant Kesare, whose sensor analysis had prevented 3 separate ambushes during the Theta campaign. All of them were looking to him for leadership in a situation that had no precedent in Imperial history. "Admiral," Captain Mordex said softly, "the humans have demonstrated that further resistance is futile. Perhaps we should consider their offer." For the first time in his career, Admiral Vextar of the Kethran Empire was facing the possibility of surrender. Not to a superior force that had overwhelmed his fleet through numbers or firepower, but to an enemy that had simply proved to be better at the art of war than the Empire's finest commanders. "Open a channel to all ships," Vextar commanded. "Let me speak with my captains before I make any decisions." As the communications network activated, Vextar prepared to have the most difficult conversation of his military career. The conference channel crackled to life as the remaining 17 captains of Admiral Vextar's fleet connected to the tactical network. Faces appeared on subsidiary screens around the bridge, some bearing the stoic expressions of career military officers, others showing the strain of watching their proud fleet systematically dismantled by an enemy they had expected to crush without effort. "Captains," Vextar began, his voice carrying the weight of 3 decades of command authority, "I will not insult your intelligence by pretending our situation is anything other than catastrophic. We face an enemy that has demonstrated technological and tactical superiority beyond anything in our experience. I am considering Admiral Webb's surrender offer, but I will not make that decision without input from my senior officers." Captain Kalmoth of the cruiser Imperial Wrath spoke first, his scarred carapace telling the story of a dozen successful campaigns. "Admiral, in 40 years of service to the Empire, I have never advocated surrender. But what we face here..." He paused, his mandibles clicking with uncertainty. "These humans have shown capabilities that match or exceed our most advanced theoretical research. Their weapons, their tactics, their strategic preparation, this is not a primitive species we can defeat through conventional means. The question," added Captain Zarthek of the destroyer Swift Retribution, "is whether continued resistance serves any purpose beyond satisfying our pride. We have lost nearly 2/3 of our fleet without inflicting a single casualty on the enemy. At what point does honor become pointless martyrdom?" Captain Mordex leaned forward in his seat beside Vextar's command throne. "There's another consideration, Admiral. The humans have captured 47 of our ships intact, along with their crews and all technological systems. If we continue fighting and lose the remaining vessels, they will have access to complete examples of Imperial technology without any opportunity for us to deny them that intelligence." The tactical implications were staggering. 47 Imperial warships represented more than just military hardware, they contained the accumulated knowledge of the Empire's most advanced engineering projects. Navigation computers with star charts showing every Imperial world. Communication systems with access codes to military networks. Weapon systems that could be reverse engineered and improved upon. Lieutenant Kesare looked up from her sensor station with an expression of professional resignation. "Admiral, I'm tracking human boarding parties on all captured vessels. They're not simply securing the ships, they're systematically downloading data cores and technical specifications. In military intelligence terms, this represents the greatest intelligence disaster in Imperial history." Vextar absorbed this information while studying the tactical display. The remaining 17 ships of his fleet were arranged in a defensive formation that would have been textbook perfect against any Imperial enemy. Against the humans, it was simply a convenient way for the enemy to locate targets. "There's something else we need to consider," Captain Kelmoth added grimly. "The humans haven't simply defeated us, they've done it while demonstrating restraint. Every disabled ship, every captured crew, every tactical engagement has been conducted with precision that minimizes casualties. They could have destroyed us completely in the first 10 minutes of engagement." The observation sent a chill through Vextar's carapace. Military analysts throughout the Empire had studied the destruction of human colonies, noting the swift and overwhelming force used to pacify primitive species. The Empire's doctrine was built on the principle that decisive application of superior firepower would break an enemy's will to resist. But the humans were employing a different approach entirely. They were demonstrating superiority without resorting to massacre. "They want us alive," Captain Zarthek realized. "They want our crews, our ships, our technology, but they also want us to witness their capabilities and report back to the Empire. This isn't just a military engagement, it's a message." Admiral Webb's voice interrupted the conference, transmitted on a secure channel that should have been impossible for the humans to access. "Admiral Vextar, I apologize for the intrusion, but I believe it's important for your officers to understand the full scope of their situation." Vextar's blood froze. The conference network used encryption protocols that had taken the Empire's finest cryptographers decades to develop. For the humans to have broken those codes, how, was all he managed to say. "Your communication systems use quantum entanglement encryption based on crystalline matrices that vibrate at specific frequencies," Webb explained matter-of-factly. "It's actually quite elegant, and, under normal circumstances, virtually unbreakable. Unfortunately for you, our intelligence specialists have had 6 months to analyze captured Imperial communication equipment from the Proxima Centauri attack." The screen divided to show Admiral Webb alongside a human female in a military uniform that bore the insignia of a technical specialist. "This is Dr. Sarah Kim, our chief cryptographer. Sarah, would you explain to Admiral Vextar how we approached the Imperial encryption problem?" Dr. Kim smiled with the enthusiasm of a scientist discussing her favorite research project. "The crystalline matrices are indeed sophisticated, Admiral, but they rely on physical constants that remain consistent throughout the galaxy. Once we understood the fundamental principles, it was simply a matter of building quantum computers capable of modeling every possible frequency combination. We achieved full decryption capability approximately 4 months ago." 4 months, Captain Mordex repeated numbly. "They've been listening to our communications for 4 months. Every tactical transmission, every strategic report, every operational planning session," Webb confirmed. "We know about your reinforcement schedules, your supply lines, and your planned invasion routes for 17 systems. More importantly, Admiral, we know about the Empire's military doctrine regarding primitive species." The screen changed again to show what appeared to be Imperial military documents, classified files that should have been accessible only to the highest levels of command. Fleet disposition reports, strategic assessments, and, most damaging of all, the complete operational plans for the Terran pacification campaign. The Empire categorizes species into threat levels based on technological capabilities and defensive potential, Webb read from the documents. Humanity was classified as Level 2, minimal threat, minimal resistance expected, subjugation to be completed within standard week. The operational plan called for a demonstration of force followed by immediate surrender or total annihilation. Vextar stared at the displayed documents with growing horror. Everything was there: troop deployments, weapon specifications, even the psychological profiles of individual commanders. The humans hadn't just prepared for the Empire's attack, they had been handed the complete blueprint for Imperial military strategy. "You've been reading our mail," Captain Kelmoth observed with what might have been admiration under different circumstances. "For 4 months," Webb confirmed. "Which brings us to the real purpose of this demonstration, Admiral. You came here expecting to face a primitive species with chemical rockets and kinetic weapons. Instead, you've encountered a civilization that has spent 6 months preparing for war with the most advanced military force in the galaxy." Dr. Kim reappeared on the screen, her expression growing more serious. "Admiral Vextar, I want you to understand something that your intelligence services apparently missed. Humanity didn't develop all this technology in 6 months. We've been working on most of these projects for decades. What changed after Proxima Centauri was our motivation and our timeline." "Explain," Vextar commanded, though he dreaded what he was about to hear. "Gravitational manipulation technology, we've been researching that since the early 21st century. Fusion power systems, we achieved those 50 years ago. Quantum computing, advanced materials science, biotechnology, all of this existed before your empire ever heard of humanity. What we lacked was the immediate need to weaponize our research." Admiral Webb resumed control of the transmission, his expression hardening. "When your empire destroyed the New Horizon, you gave us that immediate need. You also gave us detailed examples of your technology to reverse engineer and improve upon. 6 months wasn't enough time to invent new physics, Admiral, but it was more than enough time to turn our existing research into weapons that could defeat your fleet." The implications were staggering. The humans hadn't achieved impossible technological advancement in 6 months. They had simply focused their existing capabilities on the specific goal of destroying the Kethran Empire's military forces. "There's one more thing you need to understand," Webb continued. "This fleet, the ships you're facing right now, represents approximately 3% of humanity's current military capability. The Nemesis isn't our only supercarrier, Admiral. She's just the first one to finish construction." Lieutenant Kesaray's sensor readings confirmed what Vextar had hoped was an empty boast. Deep space scans were detecting massive energy signatures throughout the outer system, signatures consistent with ships of the Nemesis class. How many, he couldn't determine, but the readings suggested at least a dozen vessels of comparable size. "The Empire classified humanity as a Level 2 threat," Admiral Webb said, his voice carrying quiet menace. "That was a mistake, Admiral Vextar. Humanity isn't Level 2. We're not even on your classification system. We're something your empire has never encountered before, a species that gets more dangerous when you try to destroy us." Captain Mordex leaned close to Vextar's command throne. "Admiral," he whispered, "we need to consider the possibility that this isn't just about our fleet. If the humans have capabilities we never imagined, if they've been preparing for total war with the Empire." Vextar nodded grimly. The tactical situation had moved far beyond a simple military engagement. If the humans possessed the capability to field multiple supercarriers, if their technology truly exceeded Imperial capabilities, then the Kethran Empire faced the first existential threat in its 1,000-year history. "Admiral Webb," Vextar said formally, "I request clarification of your terms for surrender. Not just for my fleet, but for my empire. What exactly do the humans want?" Admiral Webb's expression shifted slightly, showing something that might have been respect. "We want to talk, Admiral. Real negotiations, not the ultimatums your empire typically offers to conquered species. We want to discuss borders, trade agreements, mutual defense treaties, the kind of diplomatic arrangements that civilized species make with each other." "And if the empire refuses to negotiate?" Webb's smile held no warmth at all. "Then, you'll discover exactly why humanity has never been conquered by any enemy, Admiral Vextar. And you'll learn why making us angry was the worst mistake your empire has ever made. The bridge fell silent as Vextar contemplated the choice before him. Surrender his fleet to a species the Empire had dismissed as primitive, or continue fighting against an enemy that had demonstrated complete tactical and technological superiority. It wasn't really a choice at all. Admiral Vextar stood alone on the bridge of the Dominion's Fist, staring at the tactical display that showed the complete destruction of everything he had believed about galactic military power. Around him, his officers waited in silence for the decision that would define not only the fate of the Third Fleet, but potentially the future of the Kethran Empire itself. "Open a channel to Admiral Webb," Vextar commanded, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to do. Full fleet frequency. The main screen activated, showing Admiral Webb on the bridge of the Nemesis. Behind the human officer, Vextar could see crew members working with the efficiency of a military force that had achieved total victory without suffering a single casualty. It was a sight that would haunt his dreams for whatever remained of his life. "Admiral Webb," Vextar began, choosing his words with the care of a diplomat rather than a conquered enemy, "I am prepared to discuss the surrender of my fleet. However, I believe this conversation has implications that extend far beyond our immediate tactical situation." Webb nodded, his expression remaining professionally neutral. "I agree, Admiral. This is about more than just one battle. Please, proceed." Vextar took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would be transmitted not only to the human fleet, but to every ship in his command and, potentially to Imperial High Command itself. The Kethran Empire's Third Fleet formally requests cessation of hostilities and the opening of diplomatic negotiations between our species. We acknowledge that our intelligence regarding human capabilities was fundamentally flawed." The words tasted like defeat, but Vextar forced himself to continue. "In recognition of the superior tactical position of human forces, I am prepared to surrender my fleet under the terms you have specified. However, I must emphasize that I lack the authority to negotiate on behalf of the Empire as a whole." Admiral Webb leaned forward slightly, his expression suggesting he had expected exactly this response. "Admiral, I appreciate your honesty. However, I think it's important for you to understand that this engagement wasn't conducted in isolation. While your fleet was approaching Earth, humanity was taking additional measures to ensure our long-term security." The screen divided to show a star chart of the local galactic region. Imperial systems were marked in red, human territory in blue, and what appeared to be neutral zones in yellow. But, as Vextar studied the chart, he realized that something was terribly wrong with the tactical picture. "Admiral," Webb continued, 12 hours ago, human diplomatic envoys simultaneously arrived at the capitals of 16 different species within 50 light-years of Earth. Each of those species had been contacted by the Empire within the past year and offered the choice between voluntary subjugation or military conquest. Vextar's blood ran cold as he realized what he was seeing. The yellow zones on the star chart weren't neutral territory, they were allied systems. Species that the Empire had marked for future conquest had instead allied themselves with humanity. "Impossible," Captain Mordex breathed. "The Empire has been planning those campaigns for years. How could the humans have known our expansion targets?" Dr. Sarah Kim reappeared on the screen, her expression carrying the satisfaction of someone who had solved an extremely complex puzzle. "Admiral, once we broke your communication encryption, we gained access to something much more valuable than tactical intelligence. We accessed your strategic planning networks, your long-term expansion goals, and your assessments of every species in this galactic region." The implications were staggering. If the humans had access to Imperial strategic planning, they would know about every world the Empire intended to conquer, every military deployment, every economic target. "We didn't just prepare for war with your Empire, Admiral," Webb explained. "We prepared to dismantle your expansion plans entirely. The 16 species that have joined our alliance represent 43 star systems and a combined military force that exceeds the Empire's regional deployment by a factor of 3. Vextar stared at the star chart, watching as the strategic picture shifted in real time. Red systems were being surrounded by yellow allies, supply lines were being cut, and forward bases were becoming isolated outposts. In 12 hours, humanity had orchestrated a diplomatic revolution that threatened to collapse the Empire's entire expansion strategy. How, was all he could manage to ask. We offered them something the Empire never provided, Webb replied simply. A choice. Instead of demanding surrender or threatening destruction, we offered mutual defense treaties, technology sharing agreements, and equal representation in a galactic council. We gave them the opportunity to remain independent while gaining protection from Imperial aggression. Captain Kalmatha's voice crackled over the fleet communication network. Admiral, this changes everything. If 43 systems have allied against the Empire, if the humans have the technology we've witnessed, the strategic balance of the entire sector has shifted. Admiral Webb nodded acknowledgement toward the Imperial captain. Captain Kelmoth is correct. The Empire's expansion into this region is no longer feasible. However, we're not interested in conquest or revenge, Admiral Vextar. Humanity learned a valuable lesson from studying Imperial history. Empires built on forced subjugation eventually collapse from internal rebellion. The screen changed again to show what appeared to be a draft treaty document. Vextar read the terms with growing amazement. Instead of demanding unconditional surrender or territorial concessions, the humans were proposing a negotiated settlement that would establish clear borders, create trade agreements, and provide mechanisms for peaceful dispute resolution. The Terran Alliance is prepared to recognize the Kethran Empire's sovereignty over all currently held territories, Webb explained. In exchange, the Empire would recognize human territorial claims, agree to non-aggression pacts with Alliance members, and establish formal diplomatic relations. Additionally, we're prepared to offer limited technology sharing in areas of mutual interest. Vextar read through the proposed terms twice, searching for the hidden clauses and impossible demands that would make acceptance impossible. He found none. The humans were offering a negotiated peace that would leave the Empire's core territories intact while establishing boundaries that both sides could respect. You're not demanding reparations for Proxima Centauri, he asked, unable to hide his surprise. Admiral Webb's expression grew cold for a moment. Admiral, the death of 2 million colonists isn't something that can be repaid through territorial concessions or economic penalties. Justice for that crime will come through different means. However, we're more interested in preventing future atrocities than seeking revenge for past ones. And if the Empire rejects these terms? Then, the Alliance will be forced to take more direct action, Webb replied. Admiral, I want you to understand something about human strategic thinking. We don't fight wars to prove our superiority or demonstrate our power. We fight wars to win them permanently. If the Empire chooses continued aggression over negotiated peace, we will ensure that choice has consequences. Dr. Kim reappeared on the screen, her expression carrying scientific enthusiasm that somehow made her words more terrifying than any military threat. Admiral, the gravitational collapse weapons you witnessed today represent first-generation technology. Our research teams have been working on more advanced applications, weapons that can destabilize star systems, collapse hyperspace jump points, and disrupt the gravitational fields that hold planets in stable orbits. The casual mention of planet-killing weapons delivered with the tone of an academic lecture sent chills through every officer on the bridge. The humans weren't just threatening military defeat, they were describing capabilities that could end civilizations. However, Admiral Webb continued, those weapons exist only as prototypes, and we have no desire to use them. Humanity prefers to build rather than destroy, Admiral. The choice of which path this conflict follows rests with your Empire's leadership. Lieutenant Kesare looked up from her sensor station with an expression of professional resignation. Admiral, I'm detecting hyperspace distortions consistent with incoming Imperial vessels. It appears High Command has dispatched reinforcements. Vextar felt a surge of hope followed immediately by dread. Reinforcements could potentially salvage the tactical situation, but if those ships arrived expecting to face primitive human defenses? Admiral Webb, he said urgently, Imperial protocol requires reinforcing fleets to attempt rescue of surrounded units. If additional ships arrive and attempt to engage your forces, they'll be destroyed, Webb replied matter-of-factly. Admiral, the Nemesis was never alone. She's simply the most visible component of Earth's defensive network. Any Imperial ships that arrive in this system will face the same tactical situation that defeated your fleet. The sensor readings confirmed Webb's statement. Deep space scans were detecting energy signatures throughout the outer system, not just additional supercarriers, but weapons platforms, defensive installations, and mobile units that registered as larger than Imperial battleships. "How many ships?" Vextar asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Enough," Webb replied. "Admiral, I'm going to share something with you that isn't in any of the intelligence reports your Empire captured. The human ships you've encountered today weren't built on Earth. They were constructed in shipyards located in parallel dimensions accessible through controlled gravitational distortions." The concept was so far beyond Imperial science that Vextar's mind initially rejected it as impossible. Parallel dimensions were theoretical constructs, mathematical abstractions that existed only in advanced physics equations. The idea of accessing them for industrial purposes. "Humanity has effectively unlimited industrial capacity," Webb continued. "We can build ships, weapons, and defensive systems faster than any conventional military force can deploy them. The Empire's strategy of overwhelming primitive species through superior numbers is irrelevant when facing an enemy that can outproduce your entire civilization." Captain Mordex leaned close to Vextar's command throne. "Admiral, if what they're saying is true, if they can access parallel dimensions for resource extraction and manufacturing, the Empire cannot win a prolonged conflict against humanity." Vextar nodded grimly. The tactical situation had moved far beyond anything in Imperial military doctrine. The humans hadn't just achieved technological superiority, they had developed capabilities that made the Empire's entire strategic framework obsolete. "Admiral Webb," Vextar said formally, "I hereby surrender the Kethran Empire's Third Fleet and request immediate cessation of hostilities. I also request permission to transmit the terms of your proposed treaty to Imperial High Command." Admiral Webb nodded solemnly. "Permission granted, Admiral. Your crews will be treated with honor, your ships will be secured but not dismantled, and you will have full access to communication systems necessary to contact your superiors." The bridge fell silent as Vextar contemplated the magnitude of what had just occurred. In less than 2 hours, the Kethran Empire's most powerful fleet had been defeated, humanity had revealed capabilities that redefined galactic military power, and the strategic balance of an entire sector had been permanently altered. "Admiral," Webb added, his voice carrying a note of genuine respect, "you and your officers fought with honor against impossible odds. When this crisis is resolved and formal diplomatic relations are established, I hope we can meet again under more pleasant circumstances." For the first time since the engagement began, Vextar allowed himself a slight smile. "Admiral Webb, I believe that meeting would be educational." As the surrender formalities began, Vextar realized that he was witnessing the birth of a new galactic order, one in which humanity would play a role that the Empire had never imagined possible.